Hello and welcome to this Lead Forensics webinar entitled Digital Frustration, the Thorn in a B2B Buyer's Side. My name is Joe Ducaro. I'm the Brand Awareness Manager for Lead Forensics. I'm joined today by a fantastic panel of guests. We have Carol Howley, Director of Global Marketing at Canonical. Carol, if you'd like to just give us a little wave. We have Tom Armitage, who is Sales Exec at SiteSeeker. Lila Waite is joining us from Lead Forensics. She is the Group Chief Marketing Officer. And Phil Cave is the Head of CRO at Webio. We do have a questions functions in the chat, so if you do come up with a question, pop it in the chat. If there's time at the end, we will get to it. Not sure we will, because there's going to be so much to talk about this webinar, so let's jump straight in. Okay, so what is your experience of the buying journey associated with B2B from a digital perspective? Have you experienced any frustrations yourself? And I think we'll start with you, Tom.
Yeah, so I had a couple examples here. I've often bought B2B software, so that's probably the best example. But I also was shopping not too long ago for HVAC system, a new heating system, and I've suffered kind of similar issues with some of these companies, some software and some HVAC companies. One issue is when I reach out for information and there's a massive delay in a response from a salesperson or a customer service rep. And this is mind-blowing to me because I work at an agency, we deal with lots of B2B companies, and they salivate over leads. Like the fact that I'm standing here waving and saying, I got money, I have a need, come help me, and there's a 2-3 day delay is very, very upsetting and very frustrating as a buyer. And I try to keep that in mind. I've been trying to keep that in mind as I kind of preach this type of information and this type of good word to my clients. And the second is very messy handoffs. If I meet with someone, I give them all this good information of what I'm looking for, specifically what I'm trying to, what pain points I have and what I'm trying to solve. And then, the next meeting is with the next salesperson in line or whatever it is that takes place in the handoff, and I need to go through all my needs again. Clearly, they have a discombobulated CRM system, or they're not taking proper notes, or something's going on in that handoff that is not smooth, and that leads to a lot of frustrations. So those are two examples on my end.
I have a feeling that communication in that style is going to come up quite a lot in this. We talk about things that frustrate us. Lila, let's come to you with the same question. Any frustrations personally yourself?
Yeah, I think that I have to agree with Tom, especially on that time delay. So there was I read it relatively recently from Forbes, which was published on Forbes. In terms of B2B software, the average time it takes for a B2B company to come back to a lead is 2.4 days, which is crazy, right? And exactly as Tom was saying, is when you're inquiring about something, you have a need right then and there. You don't want to wait half a week before someone actually decides that they want to come back to you, and you don't feel valued if it takes that long either. So I couldn't agree more. And I think also sometimes it can be the hoops that you have to jump through to actually get to speak to someone who can actually show you a product or a service. Sometimes that can be 2-3 stages long, and I get to a point where I can be fatigued in that process. Just one other that I wanted to touch on was that I think we'll probably come on to this in a bit more detail, but the nature of how buyers and how I inquire with things has completely changed in recent years. And so I might inquire, I inquire a lot via social media, for example, and the response times on social media is always horrendous. So that to me is a big challenge. I think that we have to address in B2B, is that it's not always going to be that direct line inquiry, and we're bad at that already, let alone anything else.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we've all experienced that, just trying to get through to speak to an actual human being rather than just typing things out forms. Yeah, it's a big old faff, isn't it? Phil, anything to add? Any frustrations personally?
Yeah, I think the big problem that we have in B2B is that we're spoiled by our experiences in our B2C lives. We're spoiled by going shopping on Amazon or Booking.com or any of the really big e-commerce companies who have pumped millions and millions and millions into repeated testing and experimentation to try and find the perfect customer experience digitally. And B2B just haven't followed suit. They're way, way behind on that front. And so in our personal lives, we go on to this great experience on Amazon or anything else, and then we expect to see it on every website we're on, whether we're in the office in our professional day-to-day life or whether we're still at home. And without that level of experience, without that same level of sort of CX on the website, it's going to be frustrating. And I agree with Lyra and Tom. There is a delay in coming back to people, but then arguably you shouldn't have questions that aren't already answered on a website. It's just that that process hasn't been gone through, and people don't. Well, B2B companies are slow to learn as well. Again, if you take Amazon as an example, just because they're obviously so successful as an e-commerce company, they know who I am when I go on a website. They know exactly what I've bought before, what I've done, when I was last there, what I last looked at. And there's none of that on B2B. And without that sort of level of personalization coming through, it's difficult to replicate a really good customer experience. So I think it's kind of a combination, but yeah, B2B has a lot of catching up to do.
Sounds almost like you need a tool that, I don't know, lets you know exactly who's looking at your website at all times. I don't know.
Maybe, yeah, that would be one way.
Carol, we'll come to you then. Digital frustrations, what are your personal experiences with that?
Yeah, I think, I mean, I can definitely agree with all of the points raised completely. I think people do just really expect that high level of personalization, as you're saying. You know, people do see a disconnect. If you reach out to them and say, you know, thanks for downloading our white paper, they're like, you should know which white paper. You know, I expect you to know what I'm looking for. I expect you to have read my problems, you know, what form I filled in. So people do expect that, and I think we're definitely playing catch up. We've got, you know, great opportunities through chatbots and through speaking to people, but making sure that that information is passed through between teams is such a hard thing to do, and you know, that level of expectation is so high. So I think that's the biggest hoops we've got to jump through in terms of B2B marketing, and you know, obviously improving all your on-site and funneling everything. It's just let down if then the buyer comes through and speaks to someone who has no idea what they want and isn't even talking about a relevant thing. I think the other thing that I really get frustrated at is not finding the information I want. Like, I actually want to know as much as possible. I think there was a recent survey saying that people love human interactions, but they do actually want to be able to be educated and make their decision. I think it's a Gartner survey that had 44% of people prefer no interaction till the point they want it, and they want to find what they need. So it's actually making sure that you've got logical, sensible amounts of information, giving people what they need so that then they can, you know, take that decision at the point they want to.
I think just to stay with you on this point, Carol, do you think that the B2B buyers' behaviour has changed since the pandemic?
Yeah, I think definitely we've certainly seen a shift within the B2B buyer. I think it's forced everything digital in a massive way. I mean, you saw everything from kind of, you know, the cost of acquisition for all your paid activity just go shooting up because no one could do anything but spend money online. So I think this big digital shift has been enormous, but I think it's also really here to stay. We've seen massive advantages investing in kind of our on-site activity, live chat, and also video. And I think giving that experience through video demos, letting people kind of see and experience things real life in person has enabled the people who aren't too keen, and, you know, probably a bit of all of us being a bit inhibited from not seeing people, you know, aren't that keen on kind of a big social interaction. So I think it's made that kind of digital journey far more important, but also made that hyper personalization and that expectation to go through the roof, because people are like, just expect that kind of expect that you're collecting their data. They know that you should understand their needs. They're expecting this anticipated personalized experience that you understand them. And I think to keep up with that is a real challenge for marketers, and it's definitely here to stay.
And Tom, how does that, tying into your original point about sort of, you know, the frustration of communication and not being able to get through to people, how has that changed post-pandemic for you, do you think?
I think it has prompted businesses to need to react and reply even faster than before. I think our urgency has really been accentuated because of the pandemic, because we've gotten so used to these online channels that, you know, if they are B2C, as Phil said, they're already reacting really, really quickly. So I think B2B needs to get their butt in gear and follow suit. You've seen these stats float around of how much research buyers do before they even make contact, right? And the number is always changing. I've seen stats where it's just like 57%, it's gone up to 70%. I don't really care what number it is. We know that it's a lot. We know that buyers are doing a lot of research before they make contact. And I think the pandemic has gotten people even more used to e-commerce with big ticket items. We've seen people buy cars. We deal with a lot of heavy equipment dealers and heavy equipment manufacturers in our space, buying 100, 200,000 pieces dollars worth of equipment, through e-commerce, and even people are buying houses, right, without sight unseen, just online. So I think that this number is going to continue to grow of how much research is going into the buying process before a salesperson gets involved, which simply warrants the need for marketing and good marketing even more than before. And I think the pandemic has really complemented and accentuated that.
Absolutely. Okay, Lila, I'm going to come to you for the next question, if that's okay. What digital touch points are you focused on as a business?
So primarily, we're always focused on our website. So that's, if we think of that as our prime real estate, we generally try and get all of our digital touch points to point back to our website. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, I don't know, but that's what we're doing. All routes point back to our website, because then we find that we can look at the stats, look at how we're converting on our website, look at the traffic, look at our sources, all of that sort of stuff. It is harder though, because I think that, just coming back to the last question, that the B2B buyer journey is not as simple as it used to be. I can't remember who said it, but the amount of research, I think that's what you, Tom, the amount of research that people are doing online, but also the complexity of that, not just in terms of looking at your website, but looking at social endorsements, looking at reviews, looking at forums, searching around a multitude of outlets. That journey, that buying journey, is not as simple anymore, and it is not as easy to track. So you might actually get an interested party who has never visited your website. That it's in that kind of dark funnel, in terms of B2B marketing. Always love a little term. So yeah, it's in that dark funnel, that untrackable funnel. But what do you do with that? And for us, our methodology is, okay, we know that this goes on, but really our single point of truth is our website. And so we try and drive as much back to that as we can. And we try to make that super informative about what we do. Because, Carol, I exactly agree with what you were saying, is that, it's really a pain when you can't find out the information. Like the number of B2B websites that I visited, I'm sure everyone's the same, where you kind of go on their landing page or the homepage, and you're like, I have no idea what you actually do. It's full of terminology. And you just can't find the information. So we try and make sure that we've got that information front and center, and that user journey is as slick as it possibly can be. Now, I'm not saying we've nailed that, but we focus very much on our website, but then we are increasingly trying to become aware of our whole digital footprint, but the front and center is our website.
I think what we'll do, Phil, is we'll come to you for this question, because I think it very much falls in your ballpark. If a business is to optimize its website conversion and reduce friction, what should it be focusing on, in your opinion?
Well, there's not a simple answer to that. Everything
never is it?
No, there's not. But there's what one website needs is not necessarily the same as what the next website needs. However, to pick up on one of the comments that Lila just made, I absolutely agree with, is that you see so many companies, you just do not know what they do. And the example I always give is pre-pandemic days, and I'm showing my age now, where everything used to be done in trade shows. You used to walk around these trade shows, and people would have spent 50, 60, 70, 100 grand on a great big stand. And you look at them and you think, I have no idea what it is that you do. And it's exactly the same now in digital real estate. And that comes back to value proposition. And value proposition is not to be confused with brand proposition. They're two different things, but the value proposition is probably the single biggest lever of conversion rates that I've ever seen, and I've been doing CRO for over 20 years. Invariably, a way to be able to clearly say why your ideal prospects should buy from you and not one of your competitors. So someone can come to your website and in the first 5 seconds, they get it. You've answered their pain point. You've shown that you have the solution. Then you start to evidence that you have a pedigree of being able to provide these solutions. That's where client logos come in, testimonials, videos, all the rest of it. But if you can do that, you're halfway there. Because if you think about it, and this is something I will probably repeat several times during this webinar, but your website has to be the digital embodiment of your best salesperson. So if you imagine you're seeing your prospect, they bump into someone in a lift at a trade event, whatever, what does that conversation look like? How do they explain what it is that you do? How do they explain why you should be listening to them and not going to one of their 50 competitors? You need to replicate that. And the only way you can get to that information is not by being a marketer sat in our ivory towers thinking, oh, we think that's what people want, so we're going to write about it. Get on the shop floor and ask your salespeople, what is it that they're saying that sets light bulbs going in customers' minds? Get that on your website, get it front and center, start to pull people through. And yeah, you're halfway there, but that is probably the biggest lever, but it is all the way through. It is replicating that best salesperson's journey digitally.
So almost trying to emulate the people behind it rather than just the sort of the corporate entity, as it were.
Yeah, and it's not an easy thing to do, don't get me wrong. I mean, it's easy for me to sit here and talk about it, but it's not an easy thing to do, because what you have to really then work out is what is their ideal buying journey. And that's a really key difference, because it's not how you as a business think you need to sell, it's how they want to buy. And you need to replicate that journey with the right assets, the right resources, the right copy, the right explanations throughout those points. And if you get that right, then yeah, you will convert a lot more of your web traffic. You'll find a lot more good people are filling in your lead gen forms, are buying your products, whatever it is, you will boost your conversion rates.
So just to loop back slightly to something Lila said, Carol, have you mapped out your digital infrastructure, sort of your digital footprint, and how did you start? What did you include? That sort of thing.
So we've not really produced kind of a full map, but we have looked at kind of the quantitative tools we've got, the qualitative tools that we've got, all the testing and improvement and measurement tooling to kind of see that we've got a bit of a view of, are we heading in the right direction? Are we measuring the right things? Have we got the right things, in place? Are we responding quickly enough? I think it's, I think you always used to focus on having the right tech stack to kind of drive your marketing success. And now it's kind of, I think a balance of factors, including that tech stack, like the people, the brand storytelling, the messaging, the speed to speak to people. There's so many other elements that I think have become more and more important for us as marketers. And it's kind of your technology architecture does drive those results and that mapping of it, but it needs to be kind of matched with, measuring the right things, getting the right people, telling the right stories, having people talking to, people in the right way, and skilled in your products and telling those stories, as you said, Phil, is just so important and fundamental to being the right thing to do. So
a lot of things to juggle, isn't it, rather than sort of which maybe it's fair to say, sort of cherry picking bits and pieces that where you find it would be most effective, I guess. Tom, any thoughts on that one, mapping out your digital infrastructure? Do you focus on one key strategy, or do you cherry pick which bits to optimize? Or?
Yeah, I think we look at it holistically for a lot of our clients. I think the tech stack and the digital touch points oftentimes go hand in hand, right? You have your social channels, you have Google My Business if you're a local company, obviously your website, which we'll continue to talk about quite a bit. But if you're talking a live chat software, if you're talking Yext and local listings management, if you're talking marketing automation and form building tools, they go hand in hand. That tech stack and what you choose to use for your software, I think creates or allows you to manage those digital touch points. And then that raises the question or the challenge with integrations. And that becomes a huge hurdle that a lot of companies need to solve, because if all of these are siloed, it makes customer service and response time much more cumbersome, and it makes measurement much more difficult, if not impossible, on some of those channels if you're not bringing it into one unified source of truth platform or dashboard. We're able to easily look at it, digest it, make decisions, and draw, decisions from that data. And integrations can be difficult to do and very costly if you don't select the right technologies that integrate with one another. So that opens up the doors for a whole new conversation here, and that's integrations.
Lila, you're nodding an awful lot. Have you got much to say on integrations that Tom was mentioning there? Or?
Well, I mean, I think the whole thing is vast, and the number of times I've been like, holy moly, I don't know how to integrate this tech stack together. I just don't know how to start. And I think that it's getting more complicated. And I think you're right. The tech stack and the digital landscape kind of go hand in hand. But also, as we started to map our landscape. But when you start, it's like you lift the lid and there's like this bigger pool that you didn't realize was there. So for example, you've got your obvious, you've got your website, you've got your social media, you've got your like review sites, for example, but then you kind of do get a little bit deeper and you've got your influencers that are mentioning you, you've got user generated content that are mentioning you, other brands that are mentioning you, you've got forums, and then it's kind of like this thing that just continues to grow and grow and grow, and you just cannot look at everything. So I think you have to prioritize, and I feel like it's the same with the integration piece. You have to prioritize what is going to have the biggest impact. I think it's important to be aware of everything and monitor everything just to see if there's any new avenues bubbling up that's actually important to your customer base that you haven't realized has become a pretty decent contributor to influence. But I think that if you were to try and just focus on everything all at once, you would just be stifled by the amount of things to focus on. So I think it's about looking at, right, where are my buyers and what influences them? And they might not necessarily be where you think it is. There's some communities, some business communities out there that are massive on Reddit, for example, and you can get huge influence by being on Reddit. You have to have a totally different strategy for that than a typical. It's almost like you can't be a marketer on Reddit, right? You have to take a completely different stance. But that you have to look at where are your audience, not where do you think your audience are, where do you think they will, where do you think you want to convey your message, where are they, and then prioritize those avenues. Doing it all at once, it's just mind-blowing.
It's funny, isn't it, mentioning Reddit? It's not necessarily one of the social medias that spring to mind when we discuss social media, that sort of thing. So yeah, I had absolutely no idea there was such a huge community over there. So going back to that then, what things can you put in place to ensure that you are prioritizing and making sure you're going to the right places then? I think Phil, we'll come back to you for that one.
Well, I guess the starting point has always got to be your data. Every decision that I always preach people should make is got to be driven in the initial data, and that's got to start. Yeah, your Google Analytics or whatever analytics package you're using is going to be a good source. You will start to see some patterns as to, on a granular level, it's always going to be organic search is going to be a big thing, but it's then looking at what sort of keywords. And when you start to analyze those keywords and pull them out, you can start to identify other channels and other sites and other resources that are going to be featured in some of those niche areas. And that takes a lot of time. It's a lot of effort to be able to do so, but the results can be very, very good. But yeah, the advice I would always give is always start with that data point and try and then work your way out by profiling your personas as best you can. And I don't just mean very generic, Bill's in his late 40s and married with 4 kids and everything like that. That's totally irrelevant. It's got to be about the way I behave and the way I want to buy in regard to your specific type of product or service that you're offering. Once you've worked that out, it's then not too hard to be able to go and see what other sort of things I might be interested in, where else I might be hanging out. And I think LinkedIn is another very good source of data, and actually Facebook. You can get a lot of good lookalike data on Facebook. And again, I think if you start to granularly work out from the data points that we do know, which is invariably going to be your GA, and work outwards, then you can start to build a fairly good picture.
Carol, any alternative methods, or is it similar story to you with as Phil there?
Yeah, I think similar story. I think possibly also a nod to what Lila said, in the sense of, you know, it's been very easy to focus on all the infrastructure points and the tech stack and all the proliferation of things. And I think for me, it's to a degree, I was going to say having a Ferrari, but probably these days you should say having a Tesla that you can only drive at like 20 miles an hour is no fun. Like, you wouldn't want to do that. And so I think for this technology and architecture and everything you want to do, like, you want to, you know, to get those results, you have to match it with significant data and also human enablement across the business to understand, to utilize that data, to know how you can kind of use those people to use the right skills to employ it, what measurement approaches in place to really tell what that innovation and success is. And I think that data, the measurement, the human enablement and prioritization is probably the areas that I think really mean that any investment, you know, ends up being realized for the business.
So just on that then, so how have you structured your teams to meet increasing demand?
So we're actually in that activity right now. Our business is kind of, I guess, termed as a scale up, I suppose. So we've invested. We hired a large number of people last year. I think it was actually over 300 people that Canonical have went to, and, you know, hoping to do a similar thing this year. So we're really growing the teams and looking at, you know, making a lot of mistakes as we build the business and as we build teams, but, you know, looking at where we have gaps, where we have needs for people, where we have, you know, data, where we can see growth, and we really need to staff that up. So I've spent a lot of time in the last year really building out a big demand gen and field marketing function, but also matched with kind of a good, strong product marketing team to make sure that we do have those storytelling and those use cases and the value propositions that then we can take the teams to market. And also we've invested, I've not personally managed it, but we've invested a lot in our customer success activities, you know, taking customers through the upsell and the journey, and also the web design team look after our website more or less, but, you know, they've been doing a huge amount in testing, user research, and making sure that we're really kind of, I guess, upskilling in that sense. So almost every area, but definitely kind of building as much as we can with the capacity and resources and prioritization. You do have to eventually find things that you can't do, and that's always kind of a trade-off and a way of kind of looking, you know, what's the impact, what's the end result, what's the highest business value, how quickly can we do things. So we're always constantly kind of every day making trade-offs and having to see where we invest things.
I'm very excited that we've caught you slap bang in the middle of going through that yourself now. I'll go to Tom with the same question, and then Lila. So again, how have you structured your digital teams to meet increasing demand?
Yeah, we work with a lot of medium-sized companies, right? Medium-sized B2B companies. They usually have large sales teams, small marketing teams, okay budgets, and a tech stack that's very limited and lots of opportunity to improve and grow. So if I could have my way and I could structure the team, I would encourage them to beef up the marketing. The need for better demand generation, better content marketing, better social media marketing on these B2B sites and within these B2B companies is so great that they could have at least 1 to 3 full-time staff members just creating content, and it would do them a lot of favors, and it would produce a lot of leads that could then be handed off to the sales team, as you guys know and everybody listening knows. So I think being able to pump up and beef up the marketing team is a good start. And I think that they need to really treat their tech stack a lot more seriously and give that a better budget. Phil equated a website with being the best salesperson on the team, and we've heard that before, and it's a really great example. And I would even go one step further in saying, you know, other types of software should and can also be acting as additional salespeople as well. And if you can carve out your tech stack budget to be completely separate from your sales and or marketing budget, that's really the way to go. So that way you're not fighting for those dollars, and it's not going to be, you know, stealing budget away from the sales and marketing team. And of course, you need to consider what you're doing for outsourced vendors, like an agency like myself, freelancers, other types of boutique services, design, videography, ghostwriting and copywriting, whatever it is that you don't feel you can get done in-house. There's lots of good services out there that you can complement your internal teams with to make sure that you're getting the job done. So there's lots of different moving parts with thinking through the team. It's not just who's on my marketing team, who's on my sales team, let's get the job done. There's lots of things that need to be working in tandem with one another. And I think that both the technology and your outsource partners need to be considered.
It's all about the cohesion.
Exactly. Exactly.
Lila, we'll come to you on that one as well then. Digital teams, what have you done to structure it?
So I might have a bit of a controversial one here in that over the course of the pandemic, so we as a department, within our marketing department, we've got about 60 team members, something like that, and everyone was working on different propositions. We had a digital team. And then towards the back end of last year, I was like, if everything is digital, why do you need a digital team? You make everyone focused on digital. It's just what everyone does, and everyone focuses on different aspects of digital, different strategies, that sort of thing. And that's how we've restructured our team recently. This year, in fact, is we don't have a digital team anymore. Everything is digital. And even Phil, you were mentioning trade shows before, and I love a trade show. I'm a big in-person event fan, and trade shows have been really important to our proposition, or you know, in the past, as they still are. In fact, we're at Digital Marketing World Forum today, but it's no longer just an offline experience. There's before the event, the actual event itself is online. You know, there's people tweeting and posting about that event right now, and then there'll be digital experiences about that event afterwards as well. And so even when it comes to something that is around in-person experiences, there's still a need to have a digital footprint associated with that event. And I genuinely think that if everything is digital, then everyone should focus on your various different strategies associated with, with your digital landscape. And they need the tools to be enabled to do so as well. I just wanted to mention, because we've talked about how vast the landscape can be, that there's amazing tools out there. So I'll use some examples just so that we're giving a few specific tips to people. So we use Media Toolkit, for example, to spot where we're being mentioned that we don't know about. Where else are we being mentioned, and how can we engage with that? Has that got good following? Is that something we can capitalize on? Like, I have no association with Media Toolkit, by the way, but I just really like what they do. Ahrefs, we use them, same thing, to find out where we're being mentioned that we don't know about. And Ahrefs obviously give you a whole loads of all information. Others are available. Hootsuite obviously tracks our social interactions, and obviously we use Lead Forensics and Webio as well. But I just wanted to give a few pieces of software out there, just a couple, that really can help with the enablement of looking and monitoring at that digital landscape.
I mean, as brand awareness manager, I can't sing Hootsuite's praises enough. I completely agree with you on that one. It's a fantastic bit of kit, but hashtag ad. Okay, so.
Or not.
Oh, well, never mind, Dave. So, Tom, if our audience can only take away one thing, one tip from you today, what is your ultimate digital frustration tip? It's a big one to end on, isn't it?
I always have a few things. Like it's hard to limit it to just one key takeaway. I'll go with this one though, because maybe the others will say some of the others in my mind. You're seeing this big movement right now around demand generation, which in my opinion is just kind of the new way of describing content marketing. Very, very important, right? You want to create content, you want to create demand for your product, for your brand, for your services, and ultimately generate more inbound leads, inbound success. But I think some folks that are big proponents of this movement have this expectation that inbound is the only way, that inbound should become 100% of your activity and your lead generation, which I think is false. I think it's a false narrative, and I don't think that's really ever going to be the case, at least for 99% of companies out there. If that were the case, then it would warrant salespeople extinct, and I don't think that that's really ever going to happen. So I think that B2B companies really need a healthy balance between inbound and outbound activity. and they need to get a lot smarter with their outbound activity. We're seeing companies really using LinkedIn Sales Nav and just LinkedIn in general much more cleverly and much more strategically. We're seeing sales folks lean on companies like Lead Forensics and Webio. We're a partner, so I got to give them a plug, and it's been really beneficial to our clients to be able to have that insight, and it really turns all forms of cold outreach into at least warm outreach, and that makes a big difference. And it's still outbound activity, it's still sales activity. This isn't inbound activity. They certainly complement one another, but there still is a need for outbound, and it's the thing that's changing is just how you go about it, and people are going about it in a much more strategic and methodical way than they did even just a few years ago. And I think it's making a big difference for the company and the salespeople that are doing it right.
It's insightful stuff, Tom. You're a wizard. Phil, we'll come to you. Same question. One final takeaway for everybody watching here today.
I think it's just to go over some of the points that have been made. It's just, if everyone can just go back, sit at their desk tomorrow morning and try and look at your website from your customer's perspective. Does it actually really say why you're great and why they should care? There's a very simple test you can do yourself, which is just the why should I care test, and just read through it and just say, well, why should I care about that? Why should I care about that? And if you have a lot of why should I cares on your website, then it needs refinement. Most of what you'll see in terms of what you can gain from doing any kind of conversion rate optimization, 80% of it will be in copy. Everyone thinks about UX and changing stuff around and changing colors of CTAs and everything else. No, 80% of it is copy. And the best thing you can do, and yeah, I'm going to do it as well, is you need to personalize that experience, because then you can actually tailor the value proposition to the people coming to your website, right? So that makes a lot of sense. So tools like Lead Forensics and Webio do offer that ability to refine your value proposition even further, refine that copy even further to make it super targeted. And it saves people several clicks, because yeah, you can put an industry page on your website and you could get there eventually from the homepage, and that's fine. But why do that when you can just put it all on the homepage? Value proposition is king in B2B, B2C, whatever kind of marketing you're doing. You have to succinctly say why people should care, why people should give you their time. And yeah, personalize it, because it makes a lot more sense. If you make it relevant to them, their job title, their industry, their size of company, whatever it is, then it's going to be far more successful.
To have your elevator pitch right on the door, just to be absolutely clear.
Basically, yeah.
Carol, one final takeaway from you, please.
I'm going to equally probably fail to give you just one final takeaway, along with everyone else, but so I might as well join the trend. So I think I completely agree with both of you so far, and I think for me it's absolutely prioritize the perspective of the customer, what they need now, what they want next. Everything that they need is kind of beyond and over and above everything. It's facilitated by amazing demand generation strategy, by great content and storytelling and copywriting, with clear value propositions, with that personalized, relevant, timely experience. All of that, it's all super important, but unless it's about the customer, then it just doesn't really matter anymore. It just has to be, I think, for me. And I think as marketers, we kind of have to do this constant blend of art and science. Like, we're almost like the perfect balance of humans. You've got to use data, but respect the craft of storytelling. You've got to tread this fine line between brand marketing, performance marketing. You want to quantify everything, but you can't quantify everything because it's not possible. There's all these journeys happening all over the place. So I think it's like almost being, understanding what you want to centralize, what you want to make bespoke, what becomes best as an ABM campaign. Like, we're just balancing so many things. And I think these new marketing truths kind of embody the confluence of these strategies of operations, technology. How you drive growth in this kind of post-COVID, digitally advanced world is exciting and challenging. And it's kind of, for me, places marketing is such a strategic advantage. And as you were saying earlier, in investing in marketing teams for small businesses, and I do obviously as a marketer believe in that. So slightly biased answer in that sense. But I think, even at this huge time of flux, we've got an amazing kind of opportunity. And you know, as I said, the critical truth is just to place that perspective of the customer at the center of everything you're trying to do, and you know, it puts you in the right path. And it's kind of one of those final goals we always sort of have a tick off in our team of, you know, is the customer first, is it important, is it relevant, you know, and then you have kind of a great way to look forward. So.
I particularly like your point about it being sort of, you know, a blend of art and science. That struck a particular chord with me. I really enjoyed that. Thank you very much, Carol. Lila,
Thank you.
one big takeaway from you, please, if you can limit yourself to one.
Yeah, no, I have. I've sort of got one, but it might be a little bit all over the place. I just love what Carol just said there. That think about what the buyer wants now and next. Like, I am stealing that, Carol, because that is just gold right there. Because I think you're right, and the point that I was going to make, which segues really nicely into that, is it's about that experience, that holistic experience. So look at the experience that you're giving your buyers before they land on your website. When they first hear about you, what does that look like? Whether it's on social, whether it's on forums, whether it's on SEO, whether it's on review sites, what are they seeing of you? When they're on your site, what are they learning about you that benefits them? And then once they leave your site, what experience are you giving them after their visit as well? That is so important to understand that journey and try it. I think, Phil, your thing of sort of saying at your desk tomorrow, how about I think about this? I've also got another thing. Try it yourself. Try, because I guarantee that so many marketers don't try their own processes. Go and test your web chat. Go and test what happens on your social media. Go and see what happens when you look at a review site or onto a forum, or when you go and read an article, you know, a piece of content that you've published, what happens on that CTA. Go and look at it and see whether it meets your needs as someone in the know associated with the brand, and I guarantee that you'll find something that's broken. I guarantee it. And then when you're thinking about that, that's the journey, that's the experience that you're giving people. So the before they visit your website, so you know they're just getting used to your brand, think about the experience that you're giving them for that. When they're on your site, what experience are you giving them there? And then after they've left your site, whether they've converted or not, at that point in time, what experience are you giving them then of your brand as well? And I think if you can nail the experience that you're giving, I think you're on the right course.
It definitely makes sense, doesn't it, to go and, you know, make sure your Zendesk is all lining up and going through to our place and everything, stuff like that. So guys, I think we're just about out of time. This has been a fantastic little chat. Thanks everybody for joining, and we'll see you again for the next Lead Forensics webinar.